All right, everyone, welcome to this week's Let'sRun.com Track Talk podcast. As always, plenty of track action to discuss. Biggest story of the week didn't happen on the track, though. Christian Coleman facing a possible suspension for 3 whereabouts failures. We will talk all about that. We've got a recap of the Paris Diamond League, which saw American Hanna Green take the victory in the 800. We'll talk about the British and Kenyan championships that were held last week, and we will preview the first of 2 Diamond League finals in Zurich, including the last ever men's Diamond League 5,000 meters. I am joined by Weldon Johnson. He is back from vacation. Robert Johnson is on vacation this week, so it's just a 2-man show once again. But Weldon, happy to have you here. Excited to talk some track.
Glad to be back. I'm sure the ratings will be up this week with me replacing Rojo. I mean, who skips out on the Diamond League final week? I think this sort of shows who's the brains behind this operation here.
Yeah, it's interesting. I would love to see a comparison of the ratings. Robert's always saying he's the most controversial man in track and field, that everyone listens to this podcast for his controversial opinions. Does that mean one of us has to step it up and, throw some conspiracies out there this week? Well done.
Transgender talk coming up, John. You didn't hype that up in the intro. You got to do that.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. All right. Well, then before we get to, I think we should start with Coleman, but before we do you want to plug a sponsor really quick?
Yes, John. FloydsofLeadville.com. If you need certified CBD products, go to FloydsofLeadville.com, enter code RUN2019. They have tinctures, creams. They even have a recovery drink, which we're giving away for our thread of the week. We'll talk about that later when we talk about one of the major teams that won't be at the Zurich Diamond League, the Bowerman Track Club. But FloydsofLeadville.com for certified CBD products. And since they are giving away their recovery drink, I think we should send it to Robert, because Robert said he's never tried the Floyd's products.
Yeah, all right. That'll be waiting when Robert gets back from vacation. So anyway, Christian Coleman, let's start with that. It has been reported Matt Lawton of the Daily Mail broke the story, and USADA subsequently confirmed it, that Christian Coleman will be facing a hearing for 3 whereabouts failures. 2 of them were USADA tests, and one of them was an AIU test. And so there's a little bit of disagreement about jurisdiction. They ultimately said USADA is going to be presiding over the case. There will be a arbitration hearing on September 4th, and that will determine Christian Coleman's fate, whether he gets a ban of 2 years, 1 year, or no ban at all. We've heard, Addo Bolden has reported, I've had a source tell me as well separately, that they think he has a pretty good chance of fighting this off, but we haven't really heard specifics, exactly what happened, what caused the mix-up here. Well, I'm interested, though. This rumor started percolating last week on Tuesday, and then on Wednesday it was spreading like wildfire. I had people reaching out to me, have you heard about this? What do you know? I was trying to confirm it. Matt Lawton got the story. How did you hear about it, and how did you react to the news when you heard it?
Yeah, I was in vacation in the middle of nowhere in Wyoming, and I think you guys texted me. I think you texted me, and I was like, wow. So I was kind of curious, who your source was, and you told me. And then it's sort of interesting how this stuff gets out, and I was like, hey, who's going to really confirm this? And everybody was certain it was coming out. And then Matt Lawton of the Daily Mail, those guys, the Daily Mail, I love my Daily Mail app, but it's the Daily Mail's got sort of interesting reputation in the news world, but they're sort of like little bulldogs. And Matt Lawton's I think he's won UK Sports Person of the Year a couple times. So I don't know how he gets the go ahead to verify it and publish it, but it came out. And so now we don't know exactly what's happening. Still, a lot of details haven't come out. Coleman hasn't put any details out. Since I was gone, I wasn't looking into it. And now I'm seeing this thing on Let's Run, and people are talking about John Drummond, who's in theory banned from the sport, how his Facebook post really defends Coleman, and it's going to show that he'll be vindicated. And I'm like, well, if that's what you have right now is the leading defense, it's kind of nuts. But I can see why Coleman's camp, stay quiet. If you have something to defend you, let it come out at the arbitration hearing, and let's go from there. But at this point, I feel like it's pretty much speculation, except for what Addo Bolden has said, that he's confident maybe that he'll be cleared. You've heard a source saying that they think maybe he'll possibly be cleared. Essentially, for drug testing, every athlete now is required to give a 1-hour window, and you'll be there in that 1-hour window. And I guess it depends on how much leeway somebody gets. Like, let's say the tester shows up, you're 5 minutes away. Is there any leeway there. Testers can also show up outside of that hour window, and I assume you're supposed to also sort of give them where you're going to be during the day, but you have more leeway outside of that 1 hour window. So it'll be interesting. USADA's pretty good at, I think, releasing the facts of what comes out. So I want to, for the integrity of the sport, we need a ruling and some transparency.
Yeah, I agree. The two things strike me as fairly interesting about this case. One, Coleman's only public comments on this were made to Addo Bolden. He hasn't released a statement. He's gone totally silent on his social media. And in that statement, he said, what has been widely reported concerning filing violations is simply not true. And I just don't see how that statement can be possible. USADA has confirmed they're going to arbitration with Coleman. They've said it's because of 3 whereabouts failures. Coleman can dispute one of the whereabouts failures, but to say that the reports are not true, that's not true. So I disagree with him there. The other thing is, to me, okay, even if you're disputing one of the findings, to get even 2 whereabouts failures as the fastest 100-meter runner in the world, the Olympic 100-meter favorite, is almost inexcusable. I mean, once you get 1, okay, I've heard athletes say that they've get whereabouts failures. There's a miscommunication. They forgot they were going to be a certain place and they forgot to update it. Fine. 1 happens. I can accept that. But once you get 1, that's a real warning sign. Okay, I got to be super careful I don't get another. Just on top of it every day. And then once you get 2, again, you should not be getting 2. The fastest 100-meter runner in the world should not be getting 2. But once you get 2, that should be the number 1 priority in your life. Should be setting your whereabouts and making sure that's exactly where you are. And not only your life, but your agent's life too. Emmanuel Hudson, I mean, which client of his is more important than Christian Coleman? He's going to win the Olympic 100 meters next year if he's still competing and healthy. How are you not calling this guy up every night and just saying, hey, Christian, did you set your whereabouts? So it's kind of crazy to me that it even got to this position. But again, I want to wait until the hearing to see exactly what Coleman's explanation is for all of this.
I guess, John, the skeptics would say, oh, yeah, there's a reason you're not showing up, right? But I think this type of, if it does stand as record, I guess it's a drug positive, but it's not a drug test positive. I think it's the better one to have. The suspensions one can be, the normal suspension for this is 2 years instead of 4. It can be reduced a lot of instances to 1 year. But in Coleman's case, the 1 year suspension is not going to help him much, right? He would still miss the Olympics, or at least the trials, which means he misses the Olympics. So he's screwed if this thing comes down. Reputationally wise, even if he's cleared now, people are always this mark will always be there, right? I mean, I guess he wouldn't be convicted of a crime, but he would have been charged with one. And I don't know, we're human beings, right? People always think about, hey, was he missing those tests?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Even if he's cleared, even if he serves no ban, people are going to say, oh, remember that episode where he missed some tests? Mo Farah was never even charged with 3 whereabouts violations, but people know he missed some tests in his past, and his critics still call him out for that sort of thing, for missing tests, even though he never even got a whereabouts violation because he didn't miss 3 in 12 months. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting how his legacy is affected. Brianna Rollins McNeil, who's the Olympic 100-meter hurdles champion, she was banned for 2017 due to whereabouts failures. I guess maybe we don't talk about the women's 100 hurdles as much as we do about the men's 100, but I feel like people don't really view her as a doper. But it's going to be interesting to see how this changes public perception of Christian Coleman.
I think Rollins' case shows that you can come back from this, but the women's 100-meter hurdles is very different than the men's 100. And I think you were the one who introduced me to this concept on the podcast a few weeks ago. Hanlon's razor. This would be his best defense. And Hanlon's razor says, never attribute to malice that which is adequately explained by stupidity. So either Coleman was evading a test for a reason or I guess his best defense was, look, I was really stupid. I just missed these things. So, I mean, or had a reason, whatever. But as you said, if I had 2 of those tests and I'm the world's fastest man in the world and I'm clean, I'm going to be freaking out. So, I don't know. It's just one of those things from the sport. Obviously, I want Christian Coleman at the Worlds. I guess not if he's dirty. But if he's there and then there's all this talk about this test and whatnot, it's going to make a much more interesting men's 100-meter finals. Without Coleman, turn to Worlds for a bit in the 100. There's no Noah Lyles, so we're going to have Gatlin again? Like, holy crap.
It's going to be Justin Gatlin. If there's no Christian Coleman, I mean, who do you have more faith in the rest of the world than Justin Gatlin? I don't think there's anyone. I would think Noah Lyles will actually get a preview. Both men are going to be racing the 100 in Zurich in the Diamond League final on Thursday. Well, it's not really a preview because Noah Lyles won't be running at Worlds. But if you look at the world list this year, you've got Coleman way out in front at 981. But then after that, number 2 is Noah Lyles at 986. He's not running Worlds. Divino Diduru is not in the same form as when he ran 986 at NCAAs. Then it's Gatlin at 987, and those are the only guys under 99. And in terms of who do you trust at a major championship, I definitely trust Justin Gatlin. I mean, I know 2015 he choked against Bolt, but he almost always delivers his best at the championships. He's good through the rounds. He's consistent. He's solid. Even at 37, I think he's unquestionably the favorite if Coleman doesn't show up.
It's crazy sort of where the men's 100 will be if Coleman isn't there. I mean, remember a couple years ago, Andre DeGrasse, Trayvon Brumell, Coleman, we had all these young guys. I mean, Coleman wasn't even in the picture. He was sort of behind those two guys. And now we're back to Justin Gatlin. So, Usain Bolt, hey, kind of getting bored. Another soccer season started. I don't see you playing anywhere. You got 3 weeks to get in shape.
Yeah. Well, no, I would say if it's Bolt, you don't have 3 weeks. You have a year to get in shape for Tokyo. Because if Coleman is banned for Tokyo, that thing's pretty much wide open. It's Gatlin. I'd actually say Lyles becomes the favorite for Tokyo. But, all right, well then, sorry. Gun to your head, I want this answer. Does Christian Coleman run in Doha this year? What do you think?
Wow. I'm just kind of pissed, so I'm going to say no.
Oh, really? I think he does. I think he gets cleared.
He probably does, but sort of, I'm kind of pissed at the guy, and he was giving you attitude at pre and stuff, and I'm just like, come on, dude, get your shit together. So I'm just kind of angry at him. So I'm like, yeah, I'll show him, but I actually want him at Worlds, so I just hope there's a good explanation for the sport, and somehow he can be there.
All right. Shall we move on to races that actually took place last week? Paris Diamond League, final regular season Diamond League meet of the year. They had a nice resurfaced blue track in this meet. I kind of enjoyed watching it at the Stade Charlotte, which has hosted the meet for a few years now since they moved out of the Stade de France. But I guess the big story from an American mid-D perspective, Hanna Green getting her first Diamond League win of the year and of her career. Really impressive. I mean, Green, we were talking about this a little bit before the podcast. How much did you know about Hanna Green before this year, Weldon?
Almost nothing. I mean, I could tell you she went to Virginia Tech and she runs for the Oregon Track Club.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what most people would know about Hanna Green. She's 24 years old. I think most famously, she was just known for getting second repeatedly to Raven Rogers in the NCAA meet. I think she finished second like 3 times. So she was always good in college, but if you look at her progression, she ran 201 in 2015 and then was pretty consistent. 202 again the next year, 201 in 2017, 2 flat last year, and now 158. She's run 158 3 different times in 2019, including 158.39 in Paris to get the win. It's an interesting race. It went out insanely fast. I think 55 mid, Chanel Price leading them out, and that's too quick for these women. I think most of them, I don't know if any of them, Natoya Gould's run 156, so maybe if she's in that kind of shape, but even so, that's still pretty fast to go out in. And Raven Rogers was the one who was leading this for a long time, but she just totally ran out of steam at the end, and Green timed it well. She went out a little bit more conservatively, and she pulled down the outside to get the win. So big win for her, and she's clearly has to be a medal threat for Doha now.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I mean, that race, since I was on vacation, I saw the kind of replay of it. And so I was kind of fast forwarding to halfway through, and I'm like, I knew Hanna Green won it. And with 200 to go, she's in 6th place. I'm like, how the hell does she win this thing? I didn't realize they went out that hard. But, I mean, it's only the second Diamond League that she's ever run in her life, and she's winning it. It's pretty crazy, how far she's come this year. And also with this whole sort of intersex, and I guess there's no point really to mix the transgender talk in there at all, but like the intersex women being banned right now from the 800, it really changes the event. And I think some of the Caster Semenya's proponents or whatever, they're like, oh, well, she doesn't, who cares? Everybody just goes down, moves down one spot. But we take out 3 intersex women, move everybody up 3 spots. I mean, there are real life impacts. And if you're second in the world versus first, that's a huge difference. If you're fourth in the world versus third, that's a huge difference. But, Hanna Green's got a huge medal shot. And it's just sort of, at that level, every little thing makes a huge difference.
Yeah, well, I mean, think about Melissa Bishop is always the one I think about. Ajee Wilson too, in terms of the women who had their careers impacted by the IAAF changing the rules, because she got a silver medal at the 2015 Worlds in Beijing. The next year, Melissa Bishop was 4th at the Olympics. The 3 women ahead of her are all currently banned because they're intersex. And then last year, she was competitive. She was a finalist in the World Championships 2017. She was a finalist in the World Championships in London. She took 2018 off to have a baby, and then announced last week that she won't be competing anymore in 2019. She's shutting down her season. Her body, she said she's had some injuries. It's been difficult getting her body right after pregnancy, and she also didn't have the World Championship standard, so it would have been tough for her to compete. But you take out the 3 women from Rio, maybe she wins the Olympics, or maybe Ajee Wilson wins the Olympics, because remember, in her semifinal heat, the 2 women in front of her were both intersex. And if Wilson's in the final, based on how she's run, she set the American record. She ran 155 the following year. Maybe she wins the Olympic final, and she wasn't even in that final. So obviously, this rule and how the IAAF and CAS has handled the situation, it's had a huge impact on the event. But now I think it's pretty clear to me, Ajee Wilson is the heavy favorite to win the title in Doha. But after that, I think the medals are totally up for grabs.
Yeah, I think even though Wilson didn't make the final, I would give her the nod of being the retroactive 2016 Olympic champion if we could rerun the race without the intersex athletes. It just shows, all across the board, these athletes are impacted. And now, Nike came out, you guys talked about this in the podcast last week, with a new policy for mothers and this sort of stuff. So all these intersex women that Nike was sponsoring, are they just essentially dropped? They get all these reduction clauses because they can't compete now and they won't be world ranked? I assume that what happens. And maybe if you're Semenya, you're a national star in South Africa, you're Olympic champion, you made some really good money. But for Nian Saba and Wambui, I mean, it's just got to be just a crushing blow not to be able to compete, not to be able to do what you love, and not be able to make a living doing it. I mean, it's hard not to feel sympathy for everybody all around. I think this is the right decision for the sport long term and how I feel women's sports should be treated. But gosh, I mean, this intersex thing just shows how sort of complicated it is, and it's not as black and white as I thought it once was.
Yeah, and I think, when I was saying intersex earlier, I think maybe hyperandrogynous might be the more appropriate term. I'm not sure if we have confirmation that Wambui and Nian Saba were intersex. It might just be hyperandrogynous is the term to refer to them. But it is very interesting, Weldon, that you point that out, that what happens to their contracts? I would love to know. Like, Francine Nian Saba, does her deal go through 2021? Is she still under contract and under Nike? Do they just totally cut her contract out completely? I'd be fascinated to know how that works.
Yeah, I have no idea at all.
All right, well, let's talk about some other results from Paris. Men's steeplechase. We saw Conseslus Kipruto got out there, his first steeple of the year, his first race of the year since he ran the relay at World Cross Country. He was up there, he was at the bell, he was in contention, and then that last lap, Soufiane El Bakkali made a big move and came down to a battle between El Bakkali and Benjamin Keegan, the 2 kickers, down the home straight. El Bakkali just pulled it out despite a nasty gash on the outside of his foot. So he got his 3rd Diamond League win of the year. To me, I thought Kipruto looked all right. He didn't look like himself yet, but to come out there and get 5th in your first Diamond League of the year, not a bad showing. I think with another month to prepare for Worlds, maybe, I think it's certainly, it's somewhat encouraging, but the big thing about Kipruto is his kick, and he didn't have his kick at all in Paris, and I'm just curious if he's going to be able to regain that by Doha.
Assuming he's healthy, he's my favorite for Worlds. I think this showed enough, and he's got a month to be there. I mean, I guess you could obviously argue El Bakali's the favorite, but Kipruto won a Diamond League final last year with one shoe. I mean, that's just the most amazing thing I've seen. So I feel like his ceiling, it's hard to argue that his ceiling's so much better than everyone else's because they've all run within, a few seconds of one another. But I've never seen anything like that. So I give that guy another month. I think that last lap's a little bit better. Did El Bakali, is he going to be 100% healthy? Is Kipruto going to be healthy at Worlds? I saw him, I didn't see, because I thought I saw something about Kipruto leaving the track gingerly, or was that El Bakali? But Kipruto said, I got through this race without any problem. I didn't have my usual strength, but that could have been caused by a small flu this week. So that makes me feel better.
What's interesting about Kipruto as well is 2 days after that race, he flies to Rabat and he runs the African Games and then drops out with a K to go. And I was wondering, I'm like, why the hell is this guy running 2 steeples in 3 days after not running any steeples the entire season? His agent, Michel Boating, told me, well, he actually agreed to run the African Games when he thought the gap between the two events, Paris and the African Games, was larger, and then they changed the schedule last week, moving the steeple up to Monday. So he still wanted to honor his commitment to Athletics Kenya, so he ran the meet, but he ended up dropping out. So I don't know if he had a setback or if his body couldn't handle 2 races in that short a span. But I found it wild that he would be out racing again just 2 days later.
Oh, I didn't know about him dropping out at the African Games, so I need to maybe reassess making him the favorite. But, man, some of these African schedules, changing stuff at the last second is pretty crazy. The Kenyan trials were changed 3 weeks ago. So now we have the Kenyan National Championships went on as planned. Originally, those were going to be the Kenyan National Championships and Kenyan Trials were going to be the same meet. They decided to postpone the Kenyan Trials till September so athletes could get better for Worlds. But they still just decided we're going to have the Kenyan National Championships separately. I mean, like 2 weeks before the trials. It's nuts. I mean, man, I don't know what to say.
I think it's crazy, though. Like, imagine if USATF acted this way. I mean, we would never be lacking for content. We'd just have a front page story every day. Like, people who think we criticize USATF, I think that it would just be ridiculous, some of the articles we could write about the stuff Athletics Kenya pulls. But yeah, we had some pretty good results from that meet. I mean, Timothy Cheruiyot wins the 800 at the Kenyan Championships, 1:43.11. That's a PR by a second and a half for him. So that was huge. And then his training partner, Elijah Manangoi, he comes back, his first race since the pre-classic at the end of June, so almost 2 months, and he runs and wins the 1500. So he is looking once again like a World Championship medal contender. And I can confirm he is not trying the 1500 5K double. We had this report. Xinhua reported it, saying he's going for the double. Well, look, Manangoi, it's ridiculous to even think this. He's never run a 5,000. So the idea that he would double up at Worlds is crazy. But his coach, Bernard Uma, confirmed to me. And actually the exact phrase that Bernard used to describe that article was disregard it as gutter contents. So he will only be running the 1500, but I think he has a pretty good chance to medal again now.
Once again, breaking news by Jonathan Galt on the podcast, shutting down the rumor that nobody believed that Manangoi would do the double. But it was written in three different Xinhua articles I saw that he really wanted the double. One of them described him as the Commonwealth 5,000 meter champion. And I was like, really? I don't remember him running that. No, he's never run a 5,000 in his life. So if you first read it in a Kenyan newspaper.
Well, it's not Kenyan, it's Xinhua. This is a Chinese one.
Xinhua is different, but it's coming. I don't know who's writing it. Unless it's from our friend Muturi. You better think twice about it. If it's from Muturi, it's guaranteed.
But do you think... So we've sort of had this argument, me and Robert, about Manangoi versus Cheruiyot, who should be viewed as the favorite for Worlds. I think he still supports Manangoi if he's running healthy because he's just won He won the African and Commonwealth titles last year. He won Worlds in 2017. He was the silver medalist behind Kiprop, who has since been banned for doping in 2015. Whereas Chariot has been devastatingly effective on the Diamond League circuit, but has yet to win gold at a major outdoor championships. But Chariot runs 1:43.1. I mean, that's an incredible time for an 800. Who do you think has the inside track in Doha, Weldon?
Man, I mean, Manangoi picked the right year to get hurt, right? I'm going to go with Chariot just because there's some uncertainty on Manangoi's fitness. Ask me after the Kenyan Championships, right? Kenyan Trials, because I assume they'll both run that, and it'll be a championship race, although it's a little bit different, Kenyan at altitude, but that's a few weeks, that's what, 2 weeks before Worlds, so you'll have a much better feeling of where Manangoi really is. I mean, obviously winning the Kenyan Championships shows he's in good shape, but it's not like he beat Chariot there, so it's going to be a great one. I'm so excited with Worlds being at the end of September. It's going to interrupt our NFL viewing a little bit, but oh my gosh, we have a full another month. Usually we're sort of done talking about track, and we have to pretend to be super excited about the Fifth Avenue Mile. And
David Monty is going to be pissed at you, Weldon.
Hey, I'm a New Yorker. We love the Fifth Avenue Mile. No, I love Fifth Avenue. I used to love coming to New York for it, but it used to sort of be a little bit of sort of depression, sort of great Sunday, and you got to go back to high school the next day. You're just ugh. So, but now I think Jenny Simpson's going to be the Fifth Avenue Mile. She's doing Diamond League final as well, and then she's going to go race Worlds. It's you'll have anticipation instead of talking about Tokyo 2020.
Yeah, maybe a fewer pints raised after the race in Coogan's, but it'll be. I'm impressed she's running it, and I think a couple other athletes, U.S. athletes who are going to Worlds, are running it as well. I just want to talk about one 1500 briefly in Paris, and it was a very deep 1500, won by Ronald Musagala in 3:30.58. He tied his Ugandan national record. The top 10 men in the race all broke 3:32. That's the first time in history it's ever happened outside of Monaco. It's happened twice in Monaco. You had Philip and Jakob Ingebrigtsen. They went 3-4. Both of them were apparently in a very heavy training block, so I don't think either of them really expected to win. You had Taufik Bakloufi. He actually didn't have the World Championship standard going in. He got it. He finished 7th in 3:31.77. But the thought I had after this race, it was pointed out to me on Twitter by someone, I don't remember exactly who, but they were like, man, if only Craig Engels had been in this race, get the Olympic standard. 10 guys broke 3:32, and 13 got the Olympic standard in this race. But Craig ran in Birmingham last week instead of Paris this week, and Birmingham was a slower race.
Yeah, you and Robert were on the Craig Engels train last week on the podcast. Stuart McSween beat him, right, in Birmingham. He was 8th in this one. Granted, he ran 3:31.81. I don't doubt for a second that Engels gets the standard if he's in this race, but who cares with the rankings and that sort of stuff? Engels is going to be in the Olympic.
Well, no. Who cares? Well, then, we don't know how they're picking the team. If USATF just says, hey, we're going off of who has the standard, we're ignoring the rankings, which all indications to me is that's what they're doing. If Engels runs 3:35.01 and there are 3 guys who have run sub 3:35, he could be shit out of luck.
Athletes are starting to pay attention. We essentially helped change the Olympic marathon trials qualifying procedures. The IAAF listened, USATF listened. We helped get that done. I think USATF and athletes now will be a little more proactive and somehow try to come up with a system that rewards world rankings, because that's what the IAAF wants. That's what athletes want. It's better for the sport. But fine, go ahead and just knock out the Olympic standard, get it out of the way. But 3:35 flat is the standard?
Yeah.
That's not that fast come on.
Not that fast. No American has run that fast this year, Weldon. None.
13 guys in one race just got it. It's not that good.
13, none of them were American. How many Americans ran that fast last year? 1, Matthew Centrowitz. The last 2 years, Weldon, 1 American has the Olympic standard.
Right. So I guess my point is, why are we giving Craig Engels the bronze medal in Doha?
I'm not. I'm saying, you're just trying to say oh no, it'll be fine. People will get it. It's no, Josh Thompson didn't even get 3:36 this year. He missed out on the team. I think it could be a huge deal. If 2 guys go into this trials next year with the standard, or 3, no, actually 3 would be the worst. 2, because if only 2 have it, you can go off world rankings. But if 3 guys have it, and one of them finishes 9th, or doesn't even make the final, it's going to be a freaking joke.
I don't know. We need to have Robert call in and get the Craig Ingles victory parade going. Although a couple weeks ago, I feel Robert was critical of Craig about something. I can't remember what that was. Usually it's just all Craig Ingles. He knows his high school coach.
Yeah.
I think it's cool. He went to, he's the best man in a wedding.
Oh, yeah, no fault. I'm not faulting him for doing that.
Had to do that. I guess Craig won't be in Diamond League final, right?
No, he needs someone to scratch.
Well, there's hope.
And since Manangoi's healthy, I don't think that's going to happen at this point.
Speaking of guys without the standard, I see Nick Willis back at 337.33. Does that mean Nick Willis won't be at the World Championships?
Robert has run the numbers, and I think he's right on the border of getting a bid based off the descending order list. So I think he will probably get in at the tail end based on the descending order list, but it's not as comfortable. Usually it's just a given Nick Willis is going to be at Worlds, and it's not this year.
When's the cutoff?
September 16th, I believe, is the
he's still got time.
Qualifying window. He does still have time, but he's running out of meets to get the time at.
Is there 1,500 in Berlin?
I don't know.
We need Nick Willis at the Worlds. I mean, otherwise, it'll show how old I am, because when Let'sRun.com first started, 18-year-old or 19-year-old Nick Willis, and I met him they used to have a thing, the Main Distance Festival, I think is what it was called. They had a series of meets in the Northeast that were pretty good. This high school kid who's going to Michigan met Robert and I at the meet, and he was so pumped. I was still running at the time, but he thought Let's Run was the coolest thing. The internet was pretty new, and for a kid in New Zealand to follow elite running, that's how you did it. And I still feel like to follow elite running, you're on Let's Run. But ever since then, here we are 19 years later, Nick Willis has been a staple at a lot of these world championships and that sort of stuff. So,
yeah. All right. Well then. So we've talked about the Kenyan championships. We've talked about the Paris Diamond League 1500, but the 1500 I was most fascinated by last week took place in Birmingham, and that was the British Championships. So we hyped this up. This was sort of my race of the weekend to watch, and it lived up to the hype. It was very close. The top 4 finishers were all separated by less than half a second, so it was a really great race. You had Neil Gorley taking the win, the Virginia Tech alum, and that was a bit of a surprise, I would say. I don't think he was among... I didn't expect him to even finish in the top 3, and he's now training for Oregon Track Club Elite. He takes the win over Josh Kerr, another former NCAA runner who was an NCAA champion at New Mexico. And then it gets really sticky, because 3rd was Jake Wightman, and 4th was Charlie Duval Grice. Now, British athletics, their selection policy is the top 2 athletes with the standard automatically make the team. Well, that's Neil Gorley and Josh Kerr. They both have it. They finished 1-2. Then the 3rd pick for the World Championship team is a discretionary selection. It's up to the selectors to pick who they think is going to be that 3rd spot. And they have Wightman, who was 3rd at the trials. And here's the case. Basically, they're picking between Wightman and Grice. And the case for Wightman is he beat Grice at the trials. He was hurt earlier this year. He had a sacral stress fracture, which meant he didn't race until June 29th was his first race. And since then, he's come and run 3:34. That's his fastest time of the year. Charlie Grice, on the other hand, has been on fire this year. He got a couple wins. He had won at the Adrian Martinez Classic. He won in Marseille. He ran 3:30.62, which is 4th on the all-time UK list, significantly faster than Jake Wightman. He was an Olympic finalist in 2016 and World Championship finalist in 2015, but he lost head-to-head in the trials to Wightman in Birmingham. So if you're British athletics, who do you pick? Do you pick the guy who has run super fast this year, but Charlie Grice did not run a great tactical race in this final? Or do you pick Wightman, who just eked ahead of Grice in the field, but hasn't in the race, but hasn't run quite as fast this season? What do you think? What do you make of this situation?
Well, that's why I like the U.S. system. Top 3 and you go to the team. I think it's tough, right? This just shows why if you're Charlie Grice, you don't let the race go 3:48. He's run 3:30 this year. Wightman's pretty good, He's even won Diamond Leagues, I think, in the past in Oslo, right?
Yep.
But he's run 3:30 and 3:34 this year. But so those are great things. But okay, Worlds doesn't have rabbits. Usually it's a tactical race, and then maybe you could argue, okay, we go with Wightman. I mean, 348? They're just like separated by 0.14. I think Grice is overall having the better season. So if you just want to, I don't know. I think if I go with the discretion, I give it to Grice. He's had the overall better season, but I wouldn't have a problem if they just said, hey, Wightman's almost there. He beat him. This shows why I think U.S. athletes like the U.S. system. There's just not, you can debate it back and forth. You know, we have so much debate in sports to begin with. Now we have VAR and all this other stuff. It's just like top three. This is why fans love the U.S. trial system. It's great for TV. It's great for drama, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, well, it's crazy. You know, Charlie Grice, he has had such a great year, and then just one bad tactical race. That's all. You know, maybe he's still going to Worlds, but if he's not, it comes down to that one bad tactical race. Is why he's not going to Worlds. But of course, I don't want to discount the guys in front of him. I mean, Neil Gorley ran a terrific race, and it's interesting. So Neil Gorley was boxed in coming off the final turn, but then on the inside, Josh Kerr just let him have lane one, and he rides the rail to the win. And it's just crazy to me how often lane one opens up in these distance races. I feel like I want to do a story on this at some point. Like, if you're Josh Kerr, why don't you hold the rail? Is there just a natural tendency for these guys to swing out a little bit because they feel pressure coming from their outside? Like, if you're say you're running on the inside of lane one, you're never going to feel pressure from your inside because you've only got the rail next to you. But you are going to feel pressure from your outside, and sometimes when you feel pressure and someone coming up on you, your natural instinct is to slide out a little bit to block them off. And when you do that, you open up the rail. So I'm kind of interested. I'd love to hear the thought process of 1,500 or 800 runners, why they sort of slide out. Is it because that looming presence next to you?
Yeah, and you act like Wightman sort of, I mean, he's running 334 and 336 this year. So opening up late or whatever, he's still having a pretty damn good year.
Oh, yeah, no doubt.
All of these guys, right, are faster than guys in the U.S., which is crazy. Except for, I don't know, what's Gorley's best this year?
I think Gorley is, maybe 330. I think he might have got the mile standard instead of the 1,500. I have to double check that.
And John, you acted like the Adrian Martinez Classic is like winning a Diamond League or something. You sort of just threw that out there.
Well, he won the race. It's a win. I was there. I saw the race. I was kind of like, man, he looked pretty good. Okay, Gorley, he ran 335.95 in Seattle on June 15th. So he got the World Championship standard by 0.05. Okay, well then, let's move on. And unlike the Bowerman Track Club, let's head to Zurich for the Diamond League final on Thursday. Diamond League final number 1. We've got the men's 800, men's 5K, women's 1,500, women's steeplechase. All these fields are good, and you're going to get World Championship previews in pretty much all of them. Obviously, no Courtney Frericks or Colleen Quigley in the women's steeple, though we will have Emma Coburn and Beatrice Chepkoech. So that should be exciting. Which of these races, I guess I'll just ask you this way, which of these 4 distance races are you most excited for on Thursday?
That's a tough one, John. I'm going to go with the men's 8 or the women's 15. Straddle the fence, go with 2. Real quickly, with the Bowerman Track Club, you know, we had the article up. Essentially, they had, I think, 3 athletes qualify for the final, and they're all skipping it. And it's pretty apparent the club just was like, we want to train in Utah and get ready for Worlds, which everybody understands. John, you seem really upset about that. It makes sense. I think now this just shows your bias as a journalist. Jerry Schumacher does not talk to the press, so now you hate Jerry Schumacher. Please confirm.
No, that's not it at all. I have a ton of respect for Jerry, and I've spoken to him a couple times outside of interviews, and he's always been pleasant and friendly. But my problem with this is, like, what's the point of having a regular season if teams aren't going to go if people aren't going to go run these races? I just think it's ridiculous. Like, I think the Diamond League, that's as close as we have to, that's our professional circuit. I think these Diamond League races, when you get the top athletes together, they're usually pretty exciting. I like watching Diamond Leagues, and I think most fans of track and field do too. And when athletes just say, we don't care about this at all, the only thing we care about is Worlds, and they never race, I just think that's bad for the sport. I think when you have Colleen Quigley or Matthew Centrowitz or Courtney Frericks, they come out of hiding, they run the pre-classic because their contract requires them to do it, then they go back to altitude, and then they go run USAs. They all ran like a tune-up race before USAs, so I'll give them credit for that. But then it's been a month since USAs. We have no idea when these guys are racing again. maybe they'll do that USA versus Europe dual meet in Minsk in September, but to just go a month without racing, and they have the World Championships coming up, I'm a fan of the sport. I like seeing these athletes compete. And when they're just out running at altitude and all you get is Instagram updates from them, to me, that's not exciting. Like, yes, the World Championships are going to be great, but we know the World Championships are going to be great. What I like is having a little excitement beforehand and seeing, hey, this person's running this well. We get to see them test each other. We get to see Coburn test herself against Chepkoech in Zurich. We're not going to see Frerichs or Quigley do that.
Right.
I just think what's the point of having these meets in a regular season in track and field if athletes are just going to say they don't matter at all? Agreed.
But I mean, I totally understand the motivation. If it was like me, I would have been the same way. Get ready for the one big meet that matters. The article we put up was pretty interesting. I think there's one athlete this year who ran in the Bowerman Track Club who ran a Diamond League meet that wasn't contractually obligated, and that would be Mohamed at Rome. Now, because everyone else ran pre, so pre may be mandated in the contract.
This is athletes who are going to Worlds. Kate Grace has run a few Diamond Leagues.
Right, because she didn't make Worlds, so now of course you're going to go run every Diamond League possible.
Right.
Mark Scott did run London, but I'm wondering if he's British, so if Nike told him, hey, we'd rather have you run the London meet than the pre-meet.
Right.
So it's just kind of crazy. And there's different ways to coach athletes and that sort of stuff. And the NOP is sort of the contrast. They've run 28 Diamond League races this year, and the Bowerman only 8. For the sport, it's better if they're competing, but I don't really... It's like I ripped into Christian Taylor because I hated the fact that he skipped USAs, but people are like, don't rip the athletes, rip the system. So we now have a thread of the discussion of the week. Robert said last week on the podcast, you guys said we should try to fail every week. So I'm trying something new. Discussion of the week. I'll put it in the show notes, but essentially the discussion centers on this and Bowerman not running. And what can the sport do to make its stars compete more? We need to have better incentives or maybe some requirements to make, I think, top-rank athletes do more Diamond Leagues, essentially. And that may be not popular with agents and that sort of stuff, but the Pro Golf Tour has requirements to be on the Pro Golf Tour. The Pro Tennis Tour has requirements to be on the Pro Tennis Tour. And the problem with track and field is just everyone's a free agent. There's so many different athletes. How do you come up with a system that makes the top people? Essentially, I think you should kind of force or incentivize them to compete in these meets.
Well, my question is, do we need to have incentives, or is it too much to ask these athletes to take it upon themselves to take some responsibility to go out and compete? Or do you think just the current situation proves that they're not going to do that? And do they owe anything to the sport? Obviously, Colin Quigley running one more Diamond League, that's not going to save the sport of track and field, but I think these are small things that go into making it more interesting for the fans that we do have. To me, I think the athletes do owe some responsibility to the sport to try to improve the sport and try to make it better as opposed to just never racing.
Yeah, but okay, they may owe something or maybe best for the sport, but that's out there now, and they're not going to be in Zurich, and they're not going to be in Brussels next week. So clearly that's enough. Maybe us bringing attention to it, maybe a little public pressure helps, but I don't think that's enough. I mean, right now, if you're an athlete, if you're Matthew Centrowitz, and your coach tells you the best way to get ready for Worlds is not to go race, if these people walk home with big medals around their legs from Doha, like, they're going to think they did the right thing. So I think unless there's sort of some requirements out there, clearly with Nike and the incentives, it's fine for them to do this. I think maybe the ranking system, a lot of performance bonuses are tied to track and field news. We've started our own ranking system. Athletes need to be ranked lower. We just can't do rankings off of Worlds. So if you win Worlds and have a weak body of work, you shouldn't be ranked that high. And then if their financial incentives are diminished because of that, then I think athletes will think twice. But so they're going to go off of money or prestige, and they're still going to get the prestige if they win the Worlds and some money. So, and their contracts for next year. I mean, that's what's most important. But somehow there needs to be more than one meet that's not preseason every year.
Right. I mean, look, and yes, I get it. I understand that Jerry's a great coach. He thinks the best way for his athletes to prepare is to get an extended training block at altitude and then come out and crush it at Worlds. And, if they go home with a pile of medals from that meet, they're probably not going to give a shit what I think. Or they already don't give a shit what I think. But they're probably not going to say, like, yeah, this was a great trade-off. But let me posit this situation. Say Colin Quigley, the same thing happens to her in Doha that happened to her in London. Namely, she's disqualified for a very minute lane violation as she was in London. So she's something, someone falls in a race, right? And they don't make the final. And there's not going to be any racing opportunities after Worlds because the Diamond League circuit's done, the track circuit's done, it's the middle of October. Are you going to look back and say, yeah, I'm glad I didn't race at all and just put all my eggs into Worlds and then Worlds went terrible? I guess they have to ask themselves that question. Are they okay to deal with the consequences if they don't end up with that medal? And it seems like they all do. They all are fine with that. But I think it's an interesting question to ask.
Right. I mean, it's a fine line, right, between getting peak ready for one race. But yeah, if they don't come home with medals at Worlds, like what do they have to show for the season? A lot of them, nothing or very little. And even Evan Jager, right? Everyone assumed the sub-8 would be there. But he didn't take many cracks at it. So if everything doesn't go right a few times, and the argument could be, well, if you try 12 times, it's not necessarily then trying 3 times really well, but...
Right. I do think that's a fair point. They hit like 2 Diamond Leagues hard per year and took 2 real serious cracks at it per year, or maybe 1 serious crack at it per year, as opposed to like 5 races where he's maybe, at 90%. I actually think there's a fair argument to the approach Jager took, and he would get very close every year. He just never quite did it. Man,
I still want to see that. All right, let's break down some of these races. I don't know. Let's start with the men's 800 because it's got 2 really good Americans in it, and it's the shortest one. So we'll start there. Things loaded. It's a World Championship preview.
Yeah, well, you got Nijel Amos, who this is the first time we've seen him since his injury in London. Donavan Brazier's out there. We've got Emmanuel Correa, who was the world number 1 last year. Brandon McBride, who just won in Paris and looked pretty good. He ran 1:43 there. And then Clayton Murphy, who's been running a lot. He doesn't have that one signature performance, but he's been pretty consistent every time out. I think, to me, it comes down to Amos and Brazier. I think if Amos is recovered from... Oh, and then, sorry, I should give Ferguson Rotich has also been running very well this year. He's run 1:42. So maybe I think those 3 are kind of the guys to watch. If Amos is healthy, I'm going to pick Amos. He's been pretty much unbeatable when he's been on his game. But very excited to see how Brazier does. This is his first race since USA's.
Yeah, I mean, with Amos, this will be a big one. The fact that Amos is back, people said he's doing workouts soon after he dropped out of that race last month. So all indications are he's healthy, but I still want to see it and see how he runs. And also, he had trouble a couple years ago. He had a pretty good season, then he fizzled out by Worlds. Well, he's got to get this one, and then Worlds is still another month away. So, one thing to look for is there any sort of tail off as the season comes along? And none of these guys are used to racing in September. Clayton Murphy, he was interesting because Brandon McBride, looked great winning in Paris over the weekend, and it was just sort of a standard pretty fast race, 1:43, and Murphy just couldn't hack it. And then I think everyone just knows his promise and how fast he's run in the past, that 1:42 at the Olympics. But, he hasn't broken, he ran 1:44 pretty early this year, but he still hasn't broken 1:44. So do we need to see something here from him, or he's still got another month? So everyone can sort of pile on to hey, I don't need to be ready for another month. And Murphy's shown he can do it at the championship races when it really matters. In career, this season hasn't been like some of his others, but same thing. He's got another month to get ready. So, I mean, the 800 can be real. If all of these guys are firing at Worlds, it's, I think, the most competitive distance event. It probably almost always is. But this year, without a Radisha type guy, it's really wide open.
Yeah, well, I'd say probably the 5K actually might be more competitive. That's been a really good event this year. But it's interesting. Correa was actually involved in a fairly nasty car accident earlier this year, and he had some problems. I think even after I talked to his agent, Karen Locke at USA's, and she was saying he was having difficulty moving his head and moving his arm, I think, was injured. So, I think maybe if he's over that, he might be back to better form, but that happened in the middle of the season and was sort of a rude interruption in his season. The argument for Murphy, what I think, if you're a Murphy fan and your argument for why he could be a medal threat or will medal at Worlds is just he has been flying all over the world this year for races. I mean, okay, so his opener was May 16th at Oxy. He ran the 800 there. Then he goes to Rome and runs the 1500 on June 6th. Sorry, 800 on June 6th. And then he goes to Oslo, runs the mile on June 13th. Rabat runs the 800 on June 16th. Then he runs the pre-classic Stanford, so he's flying all the way Rabat to Stanford, June 30th for the Bowerman mile. Then he flies back to Europe for the Lausanne 800, runs 144 there. Then it's Des Moines for USA's. And then he goes out to Paris for the 800 on Saturday, and now he's running the Diamond League final. So he has been globetrotting. He's made several. This is his third separate trip back to Europe for races, and he's been running pretty well in all of them. I mean, he's run 144, 145, 144 in his first 3 Diamond Leagues, then 144 again in Paris. So I think your argument for him would be, look, he's been globetrotting, he's been chasing races, and when he gets like a month, he's probably going to have a month of training in between the final and Worlds, and once he gets that block of just training, he might be able to improve those results and get back to the 142, 143 form we saw from a couple of years ago.
I understand the argument, but his best finish was in any of these big races is third. That was in Rabat in a 145.99 race for him. So I don't know. I mean, to medal, he's going to have to run faster. So I think that's what he needs to do.
Run faster. Yeah, that's the advice from Weldon Johnson. If you want to medal at Worlds, just run faster. Okay, let's move on. Women's steeple. We have a clear favorite in Beatrice Chepkoech, but she didn't look great. I mean, her last time out in Birmingham, she really slowed on that last lap and almost got run down by a few women. And Emma Coburn, she did what she always did at USA. She looked very comfortable. She made a move with a couple laps to go and put Courtney Frericks and Colin Quigley in their place. She sort of asserted her dominance once again. I've liked what I've seen from Coburn so far this year. That win at USA's was impressive. She ran 9:04 at Prefontaine, which is only 2 seconds off her PR, and she did that while falling in that race. I mean, I think if Coburn gets to where she's usually pretty consistent through the year as well. I think if Coburn shows up and Chepkoech runs the same race she did in Birmingham, Coburn could definitely win, but then you've also got Noro Girudo to worry about. You've got Celestine Chespol, who showed some signs of promise. She ran 9:06 in Birmingham. So, I don't know. I think it all comes down to Chepkoech for me. If she's in 8:55 form, she's going to win easily. But if she's like she was in Birmingham, I think this is a heck of a race.
Yeah, I didn't think about this, John, but could this be the first sub-9 steeple for an American woman?
This is going to be the best opportunity. I mean, Coburn, her PR was from the World Championship final, so it's not like steeple finals can't go fast at Worlds, but yeah, this is probably going to be her best opportunity. She's going to be in really good shape. It's a fast track. Conditions are good for running fast, so usually good in Zurich. So yeah, sub-9 watch. We're on alert.
I need to get off, the Evan Jager sub-8 watch. I don't know. I've had it so hyped. I'm so excited. I mean, I think sub-8 is a tougher standard to hit, just mainly because you see how fast Chepkoech's run. But no American woman has been sub-9. It would be an American record for Coburn. She's the world champion. It'd be kind of fitting, I think, to reward the person who actually showed up at the Diamond League final if she could take back the American record from Courtney Frericks. I mean, it's kind of crazy. She pretty much never loses to Frericks. The one time she does, she loses the American record. So this gives me, I should be most excited for this one. Because it's a huge opportunity for Coburn, see where she stacks up against Chepkoech, and can she go sub-9? So maybe we should hype this one up a bit.
I mean, the Diamond League finals, we're going to be hyping up all of these races. Like, I look at that, and it's a good race, but I'm more excited about the last 2 races we've got on, the last 2 distance races we've got on the schedule. There are also some other sprint races, the 400 hurdles in particular, both races I think going to be really good. Talking about world records, I mean, potential is on the table in both of them. But let's go to the women's 1500. So this is going to be interesting. Genzebe Dibaba is showing her face. She's running the final here. And Sifan Hassan has also entered. Constance Klosterhalfen. And then Jenny Simpson, the American, is running it. And of course, Houlihan didn't have enough points, and she didn't have any points. She only ran 1 Diamond League, and it was a non-points event at Prefontaine. That's the same deal with the Olympic champion, Faith Kipyegon. She only ran Prefontaine. She won it, but she, at least, I think the explanation was she had an adductor injury, which kept her out of London, and she hasn't raced since. So To me, I think it's going to come down to Hassan and Dibaba. I think Jenny Simpson maybe in a championship race is more of a factor, but in a fast diamond league, I don't think she's... I don't know. Can Jenny Simpson still run 358? She ran 359 earlier this year, but she also just turned 33 years old. So I think it could be it could be tough, but I don't know if this kind of race suits her. I trust her more in a championship final. So I think it's Dibaba or Hassan. I'm going to go with Hassan. She broke the world record in the mile earlier this year, but Dibaba, we don't really know what she's capable of. She hasn't raced for a little bit.
No Laura Muir. Do you know what's up with her?
She's injured. She's not running till Worlds. She has a calf injury, which is a bummer because the last time we saw her in London, she ran 358 with a 57 lost lap. I mean, I thought, I saw that race, I said she's going to win the world title this year. And that was despite seeing what we saw from Hassan in Monaco. Well, I guess Hassan's probably not running the 1500 at Worlds, but yeah, it's a bummer that Muir's not running this race. So really, you have three of the best women in the world, Muir, Hassan, and Kipyegon, all not running it. And yeah, I still think it's exciting because we got Muir, Kipyegon, and Houlihan are not running it, but we still have Hassan versus Dibaba.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. And too bad Robert's not on the podcast to tell Jenny Simpson to run the steeple. But with some of these injuries, we might see her on the medal stand in Doha again. I mean, Dibaba versus Hassan. I want to see Hassan win this one because I want to push her to the 15 or the 8. We joke about the 10-8 double. That's really probably not going to happen. But the 10-15 double is definitely doable at the Worlds. So if she wins this, can she really not run it at the Diamond League final? At the Worlds. So I think from a rooting interest, I want to see Hassan beat Dibaba. And John, you're always a little bit skeptical of Dibaba. I'm not sure why.
Skeptical how?
I don't know, John. You just sort of haven't seen a race in a while.
You mean her coaching associations? The fact that they raided her hotel and found EPO in the trash? I'm a little skeptical of that. Yeah, I'd actually say I'm a lot skeptical of that.
That just shows, I think, some of the stuff, right? Why people are skeptical of the sport. We had the Christian Coleman thing going on. He may or may not get a suspension. He didn't test positive. But we also had a whole hotel raided. Supposedly EPO was carted out. And not a single drug suspension, doping suspension, I don't know, parking ticket, for anything from what I can tell has come down from this thing.
Well, wasn't Musayev Bala, the Qatari athlete, I thought he was the fall guy in this situation, and I don't know if he ended up getting banned or not. He hasn't actually competed. He hasn't competed since 2016, so maybe it was a shadow ban or something like that.
John, we're in the era of fake news, so please don't once again disrupt my facts. If I have a good story, you just go with it. Like Trump gave a press conference yesterday, like 7 things weren't true.
Are you trying to say you want to be more like Donald Trump?
No, but I was reading. It's funny how you evaluate stuff. So I was reading depends on how you do it, lies, or I'm like, oh, that's just a Trump exaggeration. So 5 of them I was sort of fine with. I was like, he said 180 billion instead of 80 billion. I'm like, okay, for Trump, that's nothing, man. Okay, Dibaba, Hassan, they're always good matchups. A couple names missing. I can't believe you like this event better than the men's 8 or the women's steeple. It's still more competitive than the steeple, I think, in some sense, even though you could argue it's not what the name's missing, but sort of the top notch, if they're on, you're not sure who's going to win. I mean, I guess if Dibaba's in 350 shape, you know who's going to win. But sort of this year's form, if Dibaba and Hassan both bring it, I still don't know who wins.
Yeah, well, I mean, Dibaba's run 355. We got to build this up. Well, it's the mile world record holder against the 1500 world record holder. And yeah, Dibaba hasn't raced any races since July 9th. She hasn't run a 1500 since June 16th. So it's been a while. What's she been up to? Where has she been training? Who's coaching her? I'd love to know the answer.
Maybe she's joined the Bowerman Track Club. But I guess she wouldn't be at this race then. So that I guess I'm not going to have my first breaking news story in the podcast.
Yeah. All right. Well, here's another race I'm excited for. This is the race I'm most excited for, in fact. It is the final men's 5,000 meters ever in the Diamond League. Unless they decide to bring it back in a few years. But I think I'm sad to see the 5K go. It's not going to be the same. I love watching these races. And it's loaded, as you would expect. Solomon Barega, Telehun Bekele, Paul Shalimo, Joshua Cheptegei, Hagos Gebrawet, Henrik Ingebrigtsen's in there, Yomif Kejelcha, Stuart McSwain, Ben True, and then Switzerland managed to sneak in the home favorite, Julian Wanders. So
Ben True.
I'm just mentioning Ben True. Oh, he's not going to win, but I just...
No, I'm just saying, John, I mean, Dartmouth, we always have a Dartmouth segment here. How did Ben True make this meet?
He ran some diamond leagues. You know, that's how you got to run to make the meet.
That's true. He was flying over these races, and I feel like he's not having his best season. I mean, he's running 13:09, but his PB is 13:02. But I guess that shows. We actually reward people who race. So Ben True, win it somehow. Go sub 13.
Well, Drew Hunter could have got. Drew Hunter was in position to get an invite. He turned it down. He's been dealing with a plantar issue. I assume that's why. But Drew Hunter could have run this race if he wanted to. I guess the debate is who wins. I'm going to go with Kejelcha. He's undefeated in 5,000s this year. But, we've seen all these guys. I mean, Barrega's Barrega won this race last year in 12:43. Telehun Bekele has won a Diamond League this year. Joshua Cheptegei won the 2 mile at Prefontaine. I mean, Hagos Gebrewet has been running really well. He won the Ethiopian 10K trials. I think there are a bunch of guys who could win it. I'm going to go Kejelcha, but I think it's going to be very exciting.
That comment you just said, he won this last year in 12:43. This race was sick last year, and had everybody really excited about the 5K. And, this year we had a really fast 5K in Rome, 12:52, that Bekele won. The Haile Bekele. No relation to Haile Gebrselassie or any of the Bekele brothers. But I forgot, how fast they ran early this year. And I guess you like Kejelcha, but he's only run 13 flat this year. So the question is, does he have to put up a fast time to make the Kenyan team for Worlds?
Ethiopian team, yeah.
Ethiopian team. I think that's an interesting subplot. And they ran so fast last year. Zurich, a lot of times it used to be known as just the place to run fast. Could they really go after it again? Does Kejelcha need to go after it again? There is a rabbit in this race. Obviously, they had one last year when they ran so fast. And he was the one who set up that whole race last year, the 12:43. He just kept pushing it. And the Ethiopian, in some ways, I almost hope the Ethiopians have they're just going to go off time for the World Championships, because that would force Kejelcha to push this pace. And then, what do we see again? I mean, we saw something crazy last year. So if we're going to never have the 5K in the Diamond League again, come on, it's really stupid. Who wants to see 3Ks? Nobody likes the 3K.
You make an interesting point there, Weldon, because no one, again, some of these federations, like the Ethiopian Federation, I've talked to agents earlier this year, and they're just like, we don't know how Ethiopia's going to pick that team. We never really know. And so Kejelcha might be in a situation where he thinks he has to push the pace to get a fast time, and in so doing, he just serves as a rabbit. So everyone runs fast, and he ends up 4th in the race, and they don't pick him because 3 Ethiopians run faster than he does in this race. I mean, it could just be, I don't think that's going to happen, but I'm very interested to see how this race plays out. So let's hit a couple of the other events. I think both the 400 hurdles races are going to be terrific, because in the women's side, we've got Sydney McLaughlin against Dalilah Muhammad, the world record holder. I mean, that showdown alone is worth the price of admission. You could see another world record. Sydney, actually, it's interesting. At USA's, Sydney was asked, Dalilah just ran 52:20. It might take a world record to win in Doha. Do you think you can get to that level? And she was basically like, no, not this year. She felt that was too big a gap to overcome. And obviously that's a lot to ask of a woman who just turned 20 years old. But, I think Muhammad, though, it was like, no, I didn't run a perfect race. There's more on the table for me. So I'm very interested to see how fast one of them can run, or both of them run in Zurich.
Yeah, I didn't realize that McLaughlin thought she couldn't break the record this year, because before you said that, I was like, could we see the world record holder lose in her next race to another world record? Has that ever happened before? And I'm sure in the history of track and field, and there's some soft records it has, but that would be kind of crazy, right? If in back-to-back 400-meter hurdle races with Sydney McLaughlin and Dalilah Muhammad, if the world record went down to different people, that'd be pretty crazy. But you're saying Sydney's saying that's not going to happen. Well, if that's not going to happen, Dalilah Muhammad is my favorite for the Worlds, because she thinks she can run faster. But this is a great race, as is the men's 400-meter hurdles. I mean, the world record hasn't gone there, but people have been talking about it. You got Rai Benjamin and Karsten Warholm. And I think Warholm now has the season's best, but everyone sort of just kind of assumed after Benjamin, I think he opened super faster this year, and he's been running great at 400, that, maybe he's the one to beat. Who do you like in that one?
I like Rai Benjamin. And part of it is just, I saw his race at Pre, and he made that look so damn easy. It's like he just cruised and then really turned it on and pulled away the second half. But I don't know. I know that Samba has owned him on the circuit, or Samba beat him earlier this year, but Samba is now not running. He's been injured. But just the way Benjamin cruised through the rounds at USA's, he ran 47.23, totally unchallenged. Yeah, he ran 47.16 at Stanford. Whereas Warholm really looks like he goes to the well every time out. Like, he gets after it really aggressively, and then he's like really struggling to hold on. I think both of these guys racing each other will push them to a higher level. And just looking up, have they raced against each other? They have never raced each other in their entire lives. This is their first showdown. Because remember, Benjamin didn't run Worlds in 2017, where Warholm was the world champion. So I think we could see both of these guys maybe go under 47 seconds if they're really pushing each other. And my dream, Weldon, for this year was Samba would have been healthy, and we would have seen 3 guys break the world record in the same race in the World Championship final. I know that was a total pipe dream, and Samba, we don't know what his status is. But midway through the year, I thought that was legitimately possible with how well these guys are all running. I think we see a sub 46. It's only been done by 2 men in history, world record holder Kevin Young and then Abdurrahman Samad last year. And I think it's going to be Benjamin who gets the win.
Yeah, take it back what I said about Rai Benjamin opening fast. He got beat by, I guess, Samba in Shanghai, his first 400-meter hurdles. I mean, Benjamin ran a 44.31 way back at Mount Sac. I think he got smoked by Michael Norman in that race, but 44.3 in April for a 400-meter hurdler, it's a pretty good opener.
Well, Warholm ran 45.04 indoors.
Wow.
Which is also really good.
You think he's a bit like, maybe it's like the Japanese Akiden runners, they're sort of expected to like pass out at the finish? You think that's part of his shtick, is like he's got to look exhausted and at the finish?
I don't know. He's not always exhausted. I mean, he's had some pretty good celebrations where he goes nuts afterwards. But he's just a guy, he likes running really fast the first half. I think Benjamin likes taking it a little easier the first half and then turning it on the second. So I think it's an interesting contrast in styles. And yeah, Benjamin's my guy. I'm rolling with him, but I love watching Warholm compete, and I think this is going to be a really terrific race.
And I think I've heard Kevin Young might be going to some of these races. Like, there's been some expectation that the world record might go down. But hey, these things are hard to predict. I don't think anybody would have thought that you'd see the world record broken in Des Moines. I mean, I guess it was obviously a possibility, but it's not generally the place of world records.
Now, Weldon, one other thing that came out earlier, I think it was the very end of last week or early this week, is they said they're going to be, in September, they're going to be deciding which Diamond League meet to cut out. They're moving from 14 down to 13. They said that Zurich will be hosting, the final is just going to be a one-off final. There is no more Zurich-Brussels final. It's just going to be Zurich for the next 2 years. They said after 2021, they'll start rotating it between some of the other meets, can sort of bid for it, that sort of thing. Zurich, I think, is a great choice to host the final. I went there in 2017. It was one of the best track meets I've ever been to. I think the atmosphere is right. They always sell it out. They do a great job with everything there. So that's going to be really good. But of the 14 Diamond Leagues that we currently have, which one are you cutting for 2020 if you have the choice?
I think there's 2 obvious choices, Rabat or Birmingham. But I think you told me the Birmingham track's being renovated. So bye-bye.
Yeah, they have to redo that stadium because they're hosting the Commonwealth Games in 2022. And to be honest, so I went to the Birmingham Diamond League in 2017 as well before I went to Zurich, and the atmosphere could not have been more different. The stadium needs to be replaced. It wasn't a great stadium, but just I was like, look, the UK already has a Diamond League. I don't see why we have a second one here in Birmingham. Maybe once they get the stadium back, then you bring it back. There's more excitement, but I think to me, it's fairly obvious you cut Birmingham next year. Yeah,
I guess also next year, I guess it makes sense to have one Diamond League final because presumably it's before the Olympics, right? Or no, it'll be after, right?
Well, here's the thing. So Seb Coe has said he wants to overhaul the schedule of the Diamond League and have the finals before Worlds, but is that only during World Championship years? Because the Olympics track and field starts the Olympics on July 31st next year. I can't imagine that they are going to try to wrap up the entire Diamond League season by, the middle of July.
Never mind. I said that completely wrong. I'm still recovering from vacation. I feel like after the Olympics, you could still have 2 Diamond League finals and space it out. I have no problem with track going on. Zurich is the great place. It's widely regarded as the best one-day track meet in the world, so it's great to see them have the final. I'm still not convinced that an hour-and-a-half schedule is the way to do the Diamond League. As we've said, every prominent sporting event in America in the world lasts 2 hours usually. If you're going to have less competition on the track, fine, but then really introduce the events. You can still have a 2-hour broadcast, highlights, discussion beforehand, afterhand, sort of try to educate people about what's going on instead of just, what do we always see the Diamond League? International broadcast comes on, they're lined up for the 400-meter hurdles, the gun goes off, they talk about that thing, and they just go to the next one. There's no anticipation of here's what to see. Maybe just a 5-minute thing about what's going to happen. Before a Premier League soccer match comes on, they break down the games for the day, what's going to happen, that sort of stuff. The anticipation is what you need. 2.5-hour final would be great, but I guess it really doesn't matter. We just have the Tour Championship. It's probably best to have maybe one event, so I can see why they're doing that. But this new schedule, I want to see how they do it. I'm glad they're trying new things, but I still think there's things to be worked out.
Yeah, no, I think you hit it with the analysis in between events would be great. Could you imagine? So you've got Tim Hutchings and Steve Cram doing the commentary, and then they throw it to the studio. They have an on-site studio or something with, Michael Johnson. I know Michael Johnson was for the BBC, but someone like that who is sort of providing analysis. They're breaking down a race. They're saying, oh, did this person make a mistake here? What does this mean for the season going forward? I think that's something that would be interesting. It reminds me of soccer. That's what they talk about at halftime. Did Jurgen Klopp, what tactical adjustment did he make? Is it working? Does he need to change things? Should they bring on a sub?
Right.
Bring that to track and field.
And also it's weird now because some broadcasts are just 2 hours. There's no filler. There's really no room for commercials. Whereas others have commercials kind of cut in, but it's sort of an evolving broadcast depending on whether the local broadcaster wants to go to commercial or not. But I think a more set thing, guidelines, but even if you're just going to have the international feed somehow needs to have a studio show. We can't just show track and field, show the highlights, that's it. We can do that with ping pong, we do that with anything. You need to educate people about what they're seeing so the casual fan can kind of sort of get up to speed instead of just shooting off the gun. If we're just going to shoot off the gun and show people run, okay, we could do that with 6-year-olds. I mean, those videos seem popular on YouTube, right?
Yeah.
But there's also one more big event in Zurich, John. I don't know if you were going to go there or not, but we have the men's 100 meters.
Yeah, we talked about it briefly at the start, Lyles versus Gatlin when we talked about the Coleman stuff. But obviously, I think this is going to be very interesting because, part of me says if Lyles wins, we need to figure out a way to get him in the Worlds for the 100. Especially if Coleman's not running, we need to get him to Worlds. But the thing is, Lyles has said he doesn't want to do the double. He wants to make sure that and that whole plan has been in place this season, just do the 200. But yeah, I think it's going to be very interesting. Say Lyles smokes Gatlin in this race, then Coleman's banned and Gatlin wins Worlds. It's going to be kind of an interesting position where people think that that Lyles is the best 100-meter runner, but Gatlin's the world champ. But of course, remember, Gatlin beat Lyles when they raced in the 100 earlier this season, so it's far from a given.
I just think it's awesome that Lyles is running this race. He doesn't have to. He said he's just running the 200 at Worlds. But if he wins this thing, and I guess he was racing this even with Coleman in here, right? That's what the sport needs. People not afraid to lose. Robert said, we want to be screwing up more at Let's Run, making mistakes. What did you fail at this week? It's really not a failure if you give it your best and do your all. So go out there and compete in an off event. I mean, it's a little bit easier to do that because, I didn't lose at your main event where you got your ego tied up. But if he wins this event, they need to find a way to at least, I feel give him a window to get to Worlds. And I don't think the USATF needs to change its system. He should not bump the fourth placer from USA's. But I would have no problem if the IAAF said, hey, for events where people have won the world championships and get a bye, and the same country has a bye because there's a different person who won the Diamond League, you can take 5 and then let him go. I think that would be great for the sport. There's some emergency thing passed for that, and it's sort of just a new rule. It doesn't really hurt anyone, and it gets the best stars competing. And then Noah Lyles could sort of be this face heading into Tokyo, because if Coleman's not there, holy crap. I assume Lyles would try to do the double next year, but you need a name out there beforehand. Nobody knows who these guys are outside of track and field fans. So somehow if we had Noah Lyles doing the 100, 200 double in Doha. That'd be great. But we're already giving him the victory in this race, which may be a bit much.
No, Gatlin beat him in Monaco. I think Gatlin, I'd probably say Gatlin's the favorite, assuming, well, you're assuming he's ready to go because he hasn't really raced all out since before USA's. But yeah, I'm going to say Gatlin will win it. And Noah Lyles ran really well last week in Paris, as he always does in the 200. So he's probably my pick for second. But he was only 0.01 behind Gatlin in Monaco. It was a close one. So obviously it's going to be a very exciting race there. So, well, then I think that wraps it. We've talked about Zurich for a while. That's coming up on Thursday. That's going to be exciting. One thing, I wanted to hit our Dreams Become Reality segment of the week. I should have mentioned this when we were talking about the British 1500. I'm going with Neil Gorley, the NCAA former. He was never an NCAA individual champ at Virginia Tech, but now he's the British champ and going to Worlds. He did help them. He anchored them to the relay victory in 2018 at NCAA Indoors. So he's my Dreams Become Reality segment for the upset win at the British Championships. Do you have a Dreams Become Reality, or shall we move on to some transgender talk to close it out?
I got to go with Hanna Green. I mean, come on, right? Who would have pictured her to win a Diamond League this year? So Hanna Green, Where Your Dreams Become Reality segment winner.
Wow, two Hokies. What a great week for the residents of Blacksburg. Hanna Green and Neil Gorley cleaning up. Okay, so before we go, could be a controversial issue. I guess we'll dive into this. June Eastwood. She is a runner for the University of Montana. She is transgender, male to female. She's going to be competing in a cross-country race on Saturday. Division I cross-country race. She'll be the first male to female transgender athlete in NCAA Division I cross-country. To my knowledge, she's the first male to female transgender athlete ever in Division I. There might have been someone in another sport. If there is, I haven't heard of them. And it's interesting because her PRs are significantly faster than the collegiate records in multiple events. She's run 155 for 800, 350 for 1500, 1438 for 5000. But she did all of this, competing as a man. And since then, she has gone on testosterone suppression therapy. She has taken estrogen pills. So the rule for the NCAA is quite weak. You only need to take 12 months of testosterone, over suppressing your testosterone. There's no limit you have to get under. It's pretty vague. But she has done what is required to be eligible, and now she's going to be competing. And I guess the question is, how good is she going to be?
I guess nobody really knows, right? And that's the question. And you see it sort of both ways. I think, one, the NCAA needs to have stringent rules, real rules. So if someone's going to change essentially their biological sex, and some would say you can't do that. So I've learned so much about this. I'm like, can I say she's biologically a man? And people are like, oh, there's 5 things about biology. Chromosomally, she's a male. So I was like, okay. So if they're trying to change and maybe they're saying chromosomically she's male, but if you suppress all your testosterone, you can call them biologically female because there's some biological component here that makes people want to be a different gender. So there are all these things that are out there. But clearly testosterone, from what we know now, is one of them. And if it's not limited to a certain level, she should dominate, right? I mean, people are like, oh, she wouldn't want to do that. And I don't doubt her intentions. I think they're pure. She's a trailblazer here. She's getting a lot of attention. It can't be easy growing up thinking you're the wrong gender. So it takes a lot of courage to do this. But we're sort of like a catch-22, right? Like, if she runs really well and dominates, it's because she's not taking enough testosterone, right? If she suppresses her testosterone a ton and is okay. I mean, it's just sort of weird, right? Like, with Caster Semenya, people think it's wrong for her to take drugs, to have to take them to compete. And here, the only way June can compete is if she takes drugs. But the NCAA has no limits on the drugs you need to take, which is just, that's ludicrous. I mean, Steve Soprano of Let's Run.com has made the argument, I understand it, that in elite sports, she should never be allowed to compete, that there's, bone density advantages, height advantages, and that she can't ever be the same as someone born biologically female, that she'll always have an unfair advantage. I understand that, and maybe at elite sport, I'm fine with that argument. But if you're going to have rules that let her compete and the idea of fairness, it's like, we need some sort of testosterone cutoff, I feel like, at the very least. Because otherwise, I feel like her performance is solely related to how much testosterone is she taking. Sure, she'll have to train and do this other stuff, but if she cuts back on testosterone, she's the NCAA champion in like 3 events and setting NCAA records, like no question. So it's just sort of a weird thing, where we're at and even how you discuss it. Because like, I don't know, we are talking about, we're writing an article now, and I was saying that, she used to compete as a man, and I had her name, and you're like, you can't name her. And I'm like, what? Like, it's just factual what name she competed of. And you're like, that's called, what's the term?
Dead naming.
Dead naming. And I was like, well, I don't mean any harm by it. Can we not say Bruce Jenner won the Olympics? I mean, like, it was just sort of a factual thing. So there are all these sort of sensitive issues. But I think as long as you have a pure heart and you mention someone's name, like, some people decide, like, I don't know. I guess there's words and stuff that are offensive in anything. But I don't know. Like, if someone calls her a biological, we are told not to say biologically male by people. And other people say that's factual. She's biologically male. It's just sort of crazy where we're at now. And then even if she competes as lower suppressed testosterone and does pretty well, are there victims there, John? Do you think so? She's still bumping someone from the travel squad. Is she on scholarship? Do we even know that this sort of stuff? There's a lot of factual things to figure out.
Here is the essential issue with a male to female transgender, and it's basically a no-win situation for them. No matter how good they run, they're always going to, I think there are always going to be some people saying, well, they have an unfair advantage. If they're winning NCAA, certainly there will be people saying, she's only this good because she used to be a male. But even if she's beating someone in lower level races, it's going to be in the back of people's minds, how much an advantage does she have from having, 20 years of testosterone? Does that build up? I think I'm not scientifically literate enough to know exactly how big the advantage is if she has one. But I guess where are we even comparing this advantage to? Like, we're saying we have an advantage compared to what? It's impossible to say, okay, she was this good as a male, now this is the baseline for expectation for how good she's supposed to be as a woman, and if she's above that level, then she has an advantage, and if she's below that level, she doesn't. It's just such a difficult issue to address that way. But I also think what is interesting, I just reached out to Joanna Harper, who's also a transgender male to female athlete and scientist. She's run well at master's levels, but she pointed out to me, she said, when I ran 2:23 marathon in 1982, as a man, it was faster than the existing women's world record, and I certainly never dominated even among the old ladies after my transition. And she pointed out, with regards to June, she said, I think most people will be surprised at how much slower she will run. Remember back in 2010 to 2012 when everyone thought that Semenya was sandbagging? Soon people will be saying that about June too. She just isn't going to be that fast in cross country. She will do better in the 800 and 1500 this spring, but I still doubt she will dominate. So I don't know. I think it's interesting, but to me, yeah, it's sort of a no-win situation for her, because I think no matter how fast she runs, there are always going to be some people saying, well, she's got an advantage.
Right, and obviously we're not experts on the science. I saw some thread on Let's Run, and it was saying a quarter of people may not even respond to testosterone-suppressing medication. You could make the argument, okay, this is fair. She's suppressing her testosterone. She should be allowed to compete as a woman, but okay. But you could also make, what if someone just said, I don't want to suppress my testosterone, I want to be a woman? And people say, well, that's not the case here. Granted, it's not, but some people could say, well, that's what I want to do. That's what I'm entitled to do. So, like, I don't feel like there's any obligation to let anyone compete in women's sports, and you can draw a line however you want. And I guess the NCAA said the rule is here, but I think most people really believe testosterone is a huge advantage. And so I think if we're going to make that the cutoff, there needs to be stringent regulations. The IAAF has a cutoff of 10 nanomilliliters or whatever it is. I think for Caster Semenya, right? I mean, it's a different thing. Intersex, it's 5, right? For that. So that's a different cutoff, which is actually lower, unless I'm mixing up those numbers. I just think there's so much more that needs to be figured out. And I don't think necessarily that someone has a right to compete in elite sport in whatever gender they want to choose. She's free to live her life as she wants to. I'm fine with them trying to let this work out and let transgender people compete as women, but I could easily see the argument saying, no, she's free to compete. She can compete how she was, but she's ineligible for prizes in this category. It's a protected class, and you draw the line somewhere. So it's just sort of an interesting dynamic. And it came about, I think, much quicker than anybody thought. No one really outside of Montana knew this was happening. So it's pretty crazy. People have, speculated about this. And, others have noted, well, Renee Richards did this 40 years ago and there's not a huge problem. And maybe, we're sort of overestimating the fear because people like this of what it's going to do and damage women's sports. I think people like to have a boogeyman, but, women's sport hasn't been ruined and there's been transgender people, but I think it's becoming more common. And then what if someone says, hey, well, the NCAA has a rule now you have to suppress your testosterone, but what if someone says, like, I'm a woman, that's who I feel I am, I should be allowed to compete that way, but I don't want to alter my body chemically.
Well, I think you can't allow that to happen because then they would dominate if they are even moderately talented as a man. You can't let them. You just say you're free to live your life as you can, but you're just not entitled to compete as a woman. That you're not granted that right.
I agree with that. So I think if we're going to go there, then I think there needs to be more stringent rules about independent verification and some sort of cutoff or threshold. Because
I agree.
If people are like, oh, she's not doing this, and I don't doubt her intentions at all, but like, let's say halfway through the season, and she wants to like skip a couple pills. I don't know if it's that easy, but people sort of speculated that Semenya, when she was suppressing her testosterone, would do that to run well. So I think the NCAA rule, I guess maybe I shouldn't use the word total joke, but it needs to be improved for sure.
I think it's a joke. I think the current NCAA regulation is a joke. But yeah, I don't know. My prediction on how this unfolds is I don't expect her to be dominating or crushing everyone. I think she'll probably be a fairly average runner and she'll run a few races and then by the end of the season people won't be talking about her anymore. But you better believe if she does start winning races, it's going to be a huge national story.
Right, which is kind of interesting, right? Very average runner, but she's still a collegiate Division I athlete. And that means someone else gets bumped from the team or gets bumped from a travel spot or whatever, assuming she's in the top 7, top 5 or whatever. People also say, well, of course she's suppressing her testosterone. Well, in Connecticut, at least one of the sprinters wasn't at first suppressing her testosterone, who's transgender. And that was a totally unfair advantage, and it was allowed. Now, against the NCAA rules, that would not be allowed, but she could suppress it just a tiny according to NCAA rules and get away with it. But all indications are, and people have seen some of her training logs and online and posted it, her training sort of they're indicating, she's not at the level to be a dominant force. In some ways, I think that's better, but then long term, that might let the NCAA delay coming up with a better rule, which they need.
All right, well then, I think that's about going to do it. Anything else you want to talk before we hit Diamond League finals and really, finish up this track season before World?
Yeah, one thing real quick. We talked about car wrecks and how Emmanuel Carrera was in a car wreck earlier this year and it was pretty serious. David Rudisha, we're glad you're still with us. He was in a big car wreck this week or last weekend. And Kenyan driving is crazy. You've been there, John. There's like dirt roads with potholes. People are going on the wrong side of the road. And a lot of Kenyan running stars have died this way. It's probably the easiest way to die in Kenya. So, this wreck looked pretty bad. And it just sort of shows there's a lot more important things than running, competing at a high level. We're glad he's still here. Even this whole June Eastwood thing, let's hope she can find some happiness in her life and some stability because it sounds like she's a pretty dark place. Jeffrey Kamworor won the Kenyan 10K trials. I don't think we mentioned he's skipping the Worlds. It's a bummer, but I get it, right? There's just way more money in the marathon. But he would have been a legend, right, if he could have that 10K track championship. I think that's one thing sort of missing on his resume. So long-term legacy, I would have loved to see him to try the 10K at Worlds because the 10K seems pretty much wide open right now.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I would have picked Cheptegei over him, but yeah, how many guys have won a world title on the track, roads, and in cross-country? Has it ever been done? So that would have been pretty legendary if he could win the 10K at Worlds, but instead he's going to be focusing on New York City Marathon. Will try to reclaim the title he won in 2017.
Yep. So somehow, no threads of the week this week. We'll have more of that. But next week, we get to do this again. Diamond League final number 2 will be in Brussels. And we will have the wonderful Rojo back on the podcast. But I'm sure the ratings are up this week. Once again, right now, if you're still listening, 5 stars. Please give us a 5-star rating. Also, I got to plug the Let'sRun.com shoe site. I assume all of you bought your shoes on the shoe site this past week. I have a pair of shoes right now on my feet that I purchased off the Let'sRun.com shoe site. I don't know if I should plug this shoe because it wasn't a sponsor in Let's Run. But I got a great pair of shoes on there. I went to Let'sRun.com shoes, put in my shoe size, got a great deal. They're looking great. You can find a better pair of shoes at a better price on there. Check them out. We've received I'm not sure what the number is, but thousands of shoe reviews in the last month. And these are detailed shoe reviews, right? People say, oh, I got an Achilles problem with this shoe. Oh, I run high mileage, and I like this shoe the best. You can filter by what type of runner you are, everything out there. So check that out. Till next week, John, thank you. Our NFL preview actually show will be coming up next. John, the Cowboys are undefeated in the preseason. Good thing or bad thing?
Irrelevant thing. Are they going to pay Dak Prescott? Are they going to pay Zeke Elliott? Those are the big questions, Weldon.
Special subscribers, next hour 2 or hour 3, NFL preview. Also, we will have to discuss Crystal Palace's big victory over Manchester United.
All right. Let's cut this thing off.
All right. Later, guys.